the only show focused on stars' improvement strategies and the leaders who implement them. This is the Rising Stars with Rex Wallace Show, brought to you by Hyperlift.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Rising Stars, Season 2, Episode 2. Today we're going to get into a big change that's been coming to our industry for a while, and I think we're all eager to learn more about it and to find out kind of where it's at in the timeline, but it's the move to digital HEDIS, ECDS, interoperability, FHIR, DaVinci, all of those things, right? So, and we pride ourselves on this show of having the brightest minds and stars join us and helping us unpack topics like this. So we do have a couple of exceptionally bright people on today to help us understand this. But first, let's bring on our esteemed co-host and the CEO of Hyperlift, our sponsor, Mick Toomey. Welcome back, Mick.
Thank you, Rex. Happy to be here.
Looking forward to digging into this one and just kind of helping us all understand this a little bit more, right?
Absolutely.
So our guest today, so first off, we have Catherine Iskrant. Catherine, many of you know, she's the practice leader for Healthy People, one of the HEDIS audit firms who serves our Medicare Advantage plans and a wonderful resource to the industry. So Catherine, thanks so much for joining us and welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me, Rex.
And then we have Dr. Brent Zenobia. Brent is the chief strategist at Novilus, and I've worked with Brent for a long time, actually, and in other roles, and have a ton of respect for him as just being one of the smartest people in the industry. So Brent, thanks so much for coming on today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rex. Thank you for having me. It's great to talk to you again.
You too. So let's jump in. So Catherine, let's start with you. So 30,000 feet. When we talk about in stars, especially around HEDIS, and we talk about ECDS and digital HEDIS and interoperability, what are we, give us a 30,000 view of what we should be thinking about there. Where are we at?
HEDIS reporting will be transitioning to digital reporting in the future. The Electronic Clinical Data System, or ECDS measures, are a segue to this digital reporting in that the ECDS measures require the same digital data sources, at least many of the ECDS measures require the same digital data sources that the digital measures do. We do talk about NCQA's roadmap to digital reporting. None of the digital measures that have been developed to date have a required reporting year, whereas, as we'll get into later in the podcast, some of the ECDS measures do have a required reporting year. The buzz phrase is that digital reporting will be happening in 5-ish years. It will be more than 5 years before this happens. Because we're focused on Medicare HEDIS star measures in this podcast series, let's focus on CMS's position on digital quality reporting. CMS states that in the future, care quality will only be measured electronically through digital measures, using standardized, interoperable data and leveraging FHIR API technology.
So, and thanks so much, Catherine. So, Brent, as we talk about, interoperability and FHIR, and I've seen your presentations at some recent conferences where you did such a good job of, I think, connecting the dots, right, between, or just helping people understand, kind of in layman's terms, what is FHIR, what's interoperability, what's DaVinci, right? Can you ground us on some of those terms?
Yeah, thanks, Rex. I think for myself, the easiest way to keep them straight is to use an analogy to Legos. That HL7, FHIR, and DaVinci are rather like the relationship between the Lego Corporation, the Lego bricks, and the kits. That is, HL7 is like the Lego Corporation, it's the legal framework. FHIR is like the bricks themselves in that those have to be produced to a very high degree of accuracy, and there is a quality assurance process to make sure that you don't get any sort of imperfections or variations introduced into what are called in FHIR resources. So a FHIR resource is like a Lego brick, but then you have a pile of Legos and you have to figure out what you're going to build with them. DaVinci are like the Lego kits. They are specifically designed by expert modelers to be just the right thing if you want a model of Big Ben or Hogwarts or the Death Star, whatever it is. And I would take that analogy one further. which is, let's say you want to build an entire town of Legos, then you want for a certain look and feel consistency across the kits. So Lego City, for example, and that's kind of the situation we're in now. It's the Da Vinci is developing solutions to specific problems: prior authorization, pair exchange of data, clinical exchange of data, care gaps for both quality and risk adjustment. And those solutions have to play with each other. So it's like all of the Lego kits in the City series or other Lego series where they're all designed to work with each other and be around the same scale. So that's kind of at a very broad brush how I'd describe it.
Yeah, that's helpful. Mick, go ahead.
Yeah, so Catherine, you're saying they're talking about it being 5-ish years. It's going to be a little bit longer than that. But for either one of you, if I'm a STARS leader out there, how big of a change is this going to be for me? How concerned do I need to be? And maybe what are the things that I need to be thinking about or doing right now to get prepped for it?
Brent is always fully on target. So, as he's indicating, when digital reporting is officially required for HEDIS, it should coincide with when provider groups are able to receive FHIR HEDIS gap and care requests and respond to the gap requests with data to close the gaps. As Brent has said, the industry is not at this stage yet. We can also look at NCQA's ECDS, or Electronic Clinical Data Source, measure reporting timeline to see how many years NCQA may mean by 5-ish years to digital reporting. And again, ECDS measure reporting is a segue to digital reporting. The ECDS measures includes many current measures that are traditionally hybrid and will be switched over to ECDS reporting, and there will be no hybrid option. So the ECDS timeline to retire all the hybrid measures that do have an accompanying ECDS sister measure should proceed when health plans need to be ready to go digital. So until the non-Medicare, CIS, IMA, and CCS hybrid measures have a specified ECDS transition year by NCQA and have that date published a few years in advance so plans can prepare, that's another way to know, besides the industry not yet being ready, as Brent has pointed out, that digital reporting is more than likely 5 years out.
I guess the way I would look at it is, as I said, these standards are being developed in pieces. So it's useful to kind of break down what a STARS leader would need in terms of the individual pieces. There's member attribution. That is a largely solved problem and is ready to go. There's exchanging quality gaps. And there again, the standard is pretty mature. Most of the measures are ready to go in that format. They're going to be balloting on the 4th round of draft specification here in January. So that specification's been around for a while. Another piece of it is the clinical data retrieval. And there's 2 options there. One is you can get a bulk data transfer that's been supported for a while, although there's a lot of limitations to doing the bulk data transfer. And if you want more control over the retrieval of your clinical information, you have a couple of different options that are available under a standard called HEDIS. And to the extent that these are ready to go, I would say most of them are, but there are a few areas where some things are still being worked out. And I would particularly caution to make sure that you have a solution for QA and don't simply automatically assume that the data is going to be coming over automatically correctly mapped in the form that you need just because it's in a FHIR standard. You would be well advised to do your own checking and make sure that something has not gone amiss somewhere along the way in the mapping of the specification.
And Mick,
So does this have a big impact on like the records retrieval type vendor? The partners, like the people that they're working with, is this going to have an impact on how will you integrate with them, how you work with them, or what they offer?
Catherine, you want to start with that one?
Well, if we look at chart chase strategy in sum and speak about retrieval as well, of course, what's happening now, NCQA has developed many digital measures, but they also are letting us know that reporting is 5 years or more out. And so what NCQA is doing, they have an NCQA digital roadmap, which is transitioning us step by step closer to having the data we need and the reporting structure to be able to report the digital measures before we actually intend to go live with those measures. So in terms of chart chase strategy, because we are inching towards making the HEDIS measure set match what we'll need for digital reporting, and every year we get closer to that prior to having to report digital. So NCQA's digital roadmap includes transitioning current hybrid measures to ECDS measures that have no hybrid option. For Medicare. So far, that's only colorectal cancer screening, which will be required to report as an ECDS measure in MY 2024. For other product lines, it's CIS, IMA, and CCS. More hybrid measures will fall into this category of being reported as ECDS with no hybrid option in the future. And additionally, NCQA's roadmap for many years has been retiring hybrid measures and not developing any new hybrid measures. So let's look at the list of measures NCQA has switched from hybrid reporting to administrative reporting so far. Again, this is part of their efforts to get the HEDIS data set to match the needs that they will have for when we flip the switch to partial and then full digital reporting. So in terms of retired HEDIS measures, it started with 3 well-child visits. We'll just mention them by acronym because, of course, they're not Medicare measures. W15, W34, and AWC. The hybrid option was retired for these well-child measures in MY 2020. The data for the measures is now reported administratively under new HEDIS measures. In MY 2020, including Medicare, kidney health evaluation for patients with diabetes replaced the retired comprehensive diabetes care medical attention for nephropathy numerator. KED does not allow hybrid reporting, whereas the nephropathy numerator did. And for this current measurement year, MY 2022, advanced care planning, both an MA and SNP measure, replaces the retired care for older adults advanced care planning numerator. ACP, the new measure, does not allow hybrid reporting, whereas COA ACP numerator did. So as you're indicating, Nick, this is going to change plans chart chase strategy. So right now with hybrid measures, plans chase the numerator gaps for the hybrid sample, which is 411 cases or fewer. But when we lose the hybrid option, either because measures are switching to admin this year, in past years, and future years, or when measures that have a sister ECDS counterpart that are currently hybrid switch over, plans can no longer chase medical records just for a hybrid sample of 411 cases or fewer. So because of that, the number one recommended strategy is gaining digital data. So bulk EHR data from your provider groups, HIN, Quinn data, data aggregator data sources, whatever appropriate digital data, including state and immunization registries and lab value data that almost all plans do obtain now. After plans fill all the gaps they can from losing chart reviews for the hybrid period with digital data, then after running all that data and seeing what gaps remain in the measure eligible populations, it may be time for a strategy that would be very new to most Medicare plans, and that would be turning over abstraction to natural language processing because of its speed, efficiency, and lower cost. So again, it's manageable now, although costly, for STAR measures that are hybrid to look at a sample of 411 cases. When you lose the hybrid option, to score well, you have to close all member gaps in the eligible population. And if you're not scoring high, 90% or higher, that's potentially hundreds to thousands of records depending upon the MA plan size. So it is probably time for plans to think about in the future moving away from nurse review of cases to NLP abstraction.
So
That's a big change. Go ahead, Rex.
Yeah. So okay. So to let's paint that picture. So controlling high blood pressure, heavyweight stars measure, um, hybrid, right? Where right now we can kind of just have to chase charts on 411 people in the sample, and it's still hard, but um, from that data collection standpoint, this would in the future no longer be hybrid. It would be admin, which means everyone in the CBP denominator we would need to get records on, right? So or have data on their values, etc. And which is CBP is typically I think about half of our populations in a typical MA plan, right? So now if you're 100,000 members, you've got to get this data on 50,000 members instead of 411. You were already getting on hopefully a lot of them for your targeting, right, and to make sure you were doing the right things. But now to get compliance hits, you have to. So you're saying start out first with the ECDS, the digital, collecting the digital data from providers and et cetera. But then you're not going to get all of it. So then you're going to pivot and you need to use NLP to tap into records that you have. But and then there's also a manually chart chase. Like, will chart chase go away then, or will we still need to chase charts?
Excellent question. So again, the list of ECDS measures that currently exist does keep expanding in the future. So controlling high blood pressure does not have an ECDS measure yet. However, NCQA has proposed future digital measure replacements for 4 current hybrid measures in the Medicare set. And one of them is controlling high blood pressure. And NCQA indicates that they may look not at the most recent blood pressure, the most recent in the measurement year, which is the current approach for CBP, but to looking at the average of all blood pressures across the year. So as you're saying, we need to step away from expecting we'll have a sample of 411 for the hybrid or smaller, and that we can keep doing chart chases. So getting EHR data from the provider groups, HIE Quinn data, getting all the digital data, buying data from data aggregators is a great idea. Value-based contracts with the medical groups can get them interested in sending this data to a HEDIS provider portal or using VBP software. But there are other options out there as well. So Healthy People did ask NCQA about this. And we said, well, an option to chasing charts, which you mentioned, Rex, would be if the health plan themselves had a hypertension program that included obtaining member blood pressures, would that be acceptable for HEDIS reporting? And I know that your Rising Star members will want to know. PCS case is 004-13475. So the question was, if nurse case managers conducted the calls, gave hypertension advice, collected BPs, sent that information to the PCPs for the members, could the nurse collected BPs be used as HEDIS supplemental data? And NCQA responded that yes, this would be acceptable, but it would need to be reported back to the PCP. So yes, when we lose a hybrid sample, chasing charts is still possible, but it wouldn't be on a sample. It would be on all members in the population who showed as numerator negative. So again, that's a lot of charts for nurses to review unless it's a very small MA plan. So you might want natural language processing, but the plan's case management team can join in and make these telephone calls. They absolutely cannot just say, what's your blood pressure? It has to be part of a hypertensive program script. So talking to them about their medications, are they having any issues? So if a plan wants to do this and you still have time in Q4, develop your hypertension program script, share it with your HEDIS auditor. They're probably going to want to see not just your script, but your data form that you're collecting the data in. But so the ECDS measures, which again are a reporting segue to digital measures, they have 4 data sources: HIE, clinical registry, EHR data, and one of them is case management. So NCQA is encouraging the use of case management data. And to your question about controlling high blood pressure, or the CBP measure, it is acceptable for health plans not just to call members and say, what's your blood pressure, but to have a hypertension case management program, and through that program, obtain blood pressures directly from the members, pass it to the PCPs. So we are seeing ECDS reporting, bringing in more case management data on many measures, as we move forward towards ECDS and digital reporting. So each health plan should be looking at how many measures they might want to close out with telehealth and plan case management, because FMC, one of our new measures, and many more are eligible for case management data. Again, one of the 4 data sources for ECDS measures, also allowed for HEDIS reporting. It's starting to close out a lot of numerator gaps.
That's great. Brent, anything
And
to add?
yeah, I would like to add something, which is, we've been talking about this transition over, 5+ years that we're going to be having to the digital measures. And one thing I would point out is that we're not going to wave a magic wand and they're all going to be available tomorrow. We're going to be going through an extended period where the world exists of a mix of traditional or legacy technologies side by side with these new digital interoperability technologies, and we are going to find gaps. And as we do, we're going to need to mix and match and put some things together, because that's just how the world is. It's not all happy path, right? So as we're looking at the bits and pieces, certainly one of the things that we'll want to look at is that only some of the HEDIS measures are available in the digital form at this time. Many of them are still in traditional form. So that's thing one. Thing two is the providers themselves. They exist on a spectrum of different EHR systems. And I think it would be a mistake to simply look at where Epic is, where Athena is, where Cerner is, and say, oh, wow, they're all ready to go. There is a dizzying number of different EHR systems that are in place, particularly for the smaller providers and the ones that are in rural areas. And those are important providers. You can't just blow them off. For one reason is because in Medicare Advantage, you have to ensure that you have your network adequacy. And if you are covering rural areas, then you are having to deal with, in some cases, smaller provider groups who aren't as technically sophisticated. So you're going to have to build this into your plan, that at the same time that you are using more sophisticated methods like bulk transfer or targeted transfer of particular pieces of clinical information, you also have to have a play for those providers and those areas that are not as capable at this point. And then finally, there are the different standards themselves, and they, as I indicated earlier, are different levels of maturity. So, for example, let's just take the problem of retrieval of medical records. So there is one standard called CDEX, Clinical Data Exchange, and that is the preferred way of transferring things, either if you have a laser targeted strike and there's a specific piece or a small set of pieces of information you need about individual patients, that's a good way to go. It also supports transfer if you need a hands-on. So let's say there's a paper medical record available in PDF form and you need human intervention to get that over. CDEX has got a provision for that. There's also a provision in case you have prior authorization and there is additional documentation that needs to accompany the claim. But this standard is really the best fit for either a small number of patients or patients for whom you need limited information. If you need everything for a lot of people, then bulk transfer is a better way to go, but there are limitations to bulk transfer as well, which is, for one thing, the data's got to be very flat. So there are a number of forms of fire information that simply in today's world you cannot transfer in bulk because those procedures have not been worked out yet because the data is not flat enough. Another problem is QA. So when you are transferring that bulk data over, you still somehow have to ensure that the results are going to stand up to your PSV audit. So there's a couple of ways there. One is there is a data aggregator validation program that NCQA is rolling out, and that might be a solution in some cases. Bear in mind that those are individual data streams that are being certified. So it's not a pay one price, ride all the rides for Epic kind of thing. The other problem is that there can be mapping errors that can be invisible to you unless you are paying close attention. So you can't just, kick back and say, okay, I've got all my digital, points are all set up. I'll just let the data come rolling in and it's all going to be great. And then you go into your PSV audit and you find out that you have serious errors, then all the data that you have collected through that method gets excluded. So bear in mind that you, before just jumping into the digital environment, number one, you have to have a solution which encompasses both, future facing, future state, digital measures, and you got to have a solution for your traditional measures as well. And this does not alleviate you of the need to do quality assurance.
I would love to follow up on Brent's pay one price, ride all the rides. So absolutely, very eloquently said, there's a dizzying array of EHRs and nobody can pay one price and ride all the rides with NCQA's DAV program. But there's another way we can't pay one price and ride all the rides, and that is not all of the providers have EHRs. So as we move to ECDS and digital reporting, every MA plan needs an action plan for their non-EHR providers, those who are still using paper-based charts. That data is siloed in the paper chart unless the record is acquired. We can't be sending bulk EHR data and all the other things we'd like to do. So we need to unsilo that data. So questions each plan needs to look at when deciding what their action plan is for their paper chart providers is how many small offices and individual providers does their plan have with no EHR system? Would it be possible to install Plan EHR, P4Q, VBP, or PHM software in those provider offices? And if not, for all ECDS and digital measure gaps, will the non-EHR paper-based providers manually abstract for the plan year-round, upload those charts to the HEDIS provider portal that the plan has? If not, will the plan limit those providers' panel sizes or close their panel if they can't accommodate their digital data needs and they're not in an area where there are patient access issues? Also, as plans look to expand their network or modify their network, are MA plans on a go-forward basis going to stop contracting with providers that don't have an EHR system in locations where their network does not have significant patient access issues? So we are moving to ECDS and digital reporting, and there is some thought by people that this means, well, if I have a HEDIS provider portal, I'm not going to be using that anymore. We're getting bulk data, big data. That's the past. Well, actually, we have data leaks for EHR data. The non-structured fields data isn't in there. We've got EHR providers. We've got many data leaks. So until we're many, many years in the future, we're not getting rid of our HEDIS provider portals if we're trying to be 5-star. So provider portals, always important for closing gaps in care. They're used by non-EHR providers, very important for ECDS gap in care closure. And they can get their gaps in care, they can upload information. And also for the EHR-based providers that aren't closing gaps with their EHR feeds or their claims, they should still be using the provider portal as well. If you don't have a value-based contract with a provider or a provider group, in order to incentivize them to use your provider portal, you should probably pay for that data and tie the payment of the data on the provider portal to the accuracy of their uploaded data. As Brent alluded to, if the data doesn't pass audit, it's worthless to you in terms of HEDIS reporting. So you don't just want to pay for data provision on your provider portal. You want to ensure that it will pass auditor review each year, because HEDIS provider portal data is non-standard and it does require a case sample by the auditor every year. So the HEDIS provider portal is a non-digital solution. However, if your providers are all using it in a systematic way, that does reduce provider abrasion. So it may be one of our best remnants of old HEDIS reporting that will continue to go forward. Because EHR data has so much in non-structured fields, we really are at no point to be doing away with our HEDIS provider portals yet.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Catherine, and some other things that occurred to me as you're talking, that when the plans are looking at which provider groups they're going to continue to support, and they're looking at those provider groups who are struggling more with their technology, don't be so quick to think that you can cut them off without consequences. Even if there's not a network adequacy issue, take a look at who that provider is serving, because you may find that the population skews toward those who are hit by social determinant of health issues, or are Medicaid, Medicare dual eligibles are disproportionate in that provider group. So be very careful about that.
Yeah, great point. And I mean, it sounds like, I mean, I feel like the provider strategy is, it's the one that I'm not hearing a lot about from plans. I hear a lot of plans, or more plans, talking about how they're approaching this move to ECDS and things they're doing internally, but not necessarily, and maybe I'm not saying they're not doing it, but I'm definitely not hearing it. The provider strategy, as far as, you know, you have your big groups that participate hopefully in a VBC arrangement, right? A value-based contract, where a value-based care, where they have hopefully incentives in place to share that data, or whatever, CPT2 codes, or some way to get that the information to you in the way that you need it, right? And I think the accuracy suggestion is a really good one, because I don't know many plans incenting based on accuracy yet of that data, more just will they share it or not. But then on all the ones that are not big enough to do that, and there are a lot of segments in there, but there needs to be a strategy for all of those, right? If they don't have an EHR, if they're not participating on your portal, your HEDIS portal, your CareGap portal, like having well thought out and well executed strategies to make sure you're not leaving that data on the table. And Brent, to your point, yeah, if you consider not contracting with them any longer because they're really small and don't have an EHR, yeah, I mean, it may go right against what we're trying to do with health equity, right? And it may create inequity in a way that we didn't intend to, but we didn't think through it enough. So that's great advice.
Well, and I think Catherine is also spot on when she says that the HEDIS provider portal is not going away. I know I have spoken to some people who believe that interoperability means there's not going to be any need for anybody in the middle anymore, and all of the communication will be directly between the provider and the payer, or the engine. I think that is a little overly optimistic. I think there are good structural reasons why there will probably always be some kind of role in the middle. For example, on risk adjustment, that QA role, there is a need for a certified HCC coder in some form to be validating that evidence that's coming back for risk-adjusted gap closures. And you could have something analogous where you're having a certain sample of the data that is being returned routed over to a HEDIS abstractor, so that you can ensure that maybe you're not going to review every record that's coming across, but you can review every 10th or every 20th record, something like that, and do a statistical validation of the quality of the feed. That function is best performed in the middle between the providers and the payers. There's also that issue I was alluding to earlier, which is that for the next several years, we're going to be living in a heterogeneous environment where there's all kinds of mix and match combinations, and the HEDIS portal could be your friend in terms of hiding a good deal of that complexity from you. So the portal takes care of, oh well, is this a provider who is really fully capable of doing direct EHR integration, or is this provider who needs a lot of hand holding, or their data is questionable in some way? You could set that HEDIS portal up to, if you identify there are certain feeds that are quality challenged, you could intercept some of those feeds and subject them to additional scrutiny. So there's a lot of things that that portal in the middle can do for you. And also adding to what Catherine said, I don't think natural language processing is going away. And a big part of that is because even in an ideal world, not all of that data is going to be available in structured form. There is too much valuable data that is in those unstructured notes, and you're going to need NLP to come in, unpack some of that unstructured data, and then cross-check it against the structured fields so that you can winnow out some of those situations like, okay, you saw a hit for diabetes, but it was in the unstructured field, and they were talking about family history of diabetes. So you need to be able to take those hits into account. And one of the best ways of doing that is to cross-check against the information that's in the structured fields so that you can reduce the number of false positives that your certified people are having to review for you, your certified coders.
That is such a brilliant point, and I'd love to follow up with a specific HEDIS measure example. So one of the most concerning measures for Medicare plans on the stars is the fact that in MY 2024, colorectal cancer screening will transition to ECDS reporting with no hybrid option. So Brent's been doing a terrific job guiding us through the understanding that when you get bulk EHR data from your network, it's importing the structured data fields from the EHR and not the data in the unstructured field. So for that unstructured data, NLP as an approach would work, or the provider portal where the providers upload the records and maybe abstract would work. But let's get specific about COLE, which will be due in MY 2024. So we have a lot of data for COLE in unstructured fields. The reason for that is COLE colonoscopies can go back 10 years. So of course, if we look at the industry 10 years ago, there was much less in standard fields within EHRs. Also, the COLE exclusions, colorectal cancer and total colectomy, can go back even further than 10 years because they do span the member's life. So most EMRs are not going to have all the colonoscopies, all the colorectal cancer histories, or all the total colectomies that you're looking for in structured fields. So you're going to need to rely on NLP or nurses reviewing charts or having providers incented to provide this data and potentially the chart through upload to your provider portal.
You know, there's another aspect of that to add to what Catherine is saying, which is what I call death by data asphyxiation. Which is that when you turn this digital spigot on, you're going to get some very large, very bloated files, and you may only be looking for a piece of that. So also think about what is your strategy going to be for winnowing through these enormous haystacks of data in order to find the one needle that you're looking for. So that too is an issue when you are pressed for time, as you would be during a HEDIS audit, and you want to make sure that you're just getting that data. You're not going to get that purely through bulk data transfer, because that's going to do exactly what it says. You're going to get a lot of data. So just be thinking about where you're going to implement your filtering and how you're going to filter that data so that you're getting the best signal to noise ratio that you can.
And to that point, I would love to add about what you want to count and what you don't want to count. So starting with what you do want to count, completely agree with Brent on what he's saying. And sometimes a really fast, quick check to see what would this huge data stream do for HEDIS reporting when you're not in the regulatory run, but in your proactive or test runs. You can load that data to your HEDIS vendor and get a supplemental database impact report. So it's a huge volume of data. You're not going to know everything about the data, but you would know from your vendor during a proactive non-regulatory run which numerators did it help, which exclusions did it help, did I expect more impact if that group has 40% of my members and I wasn't getting EHR before? Does this make sense? And did I get what I needed from the structured fields? So that's what we do want, and just a quick check on, okay, I have to do such extensive QA of this data, but first just somebody tell me what's counting, what's not. I think the HEDIS vendors running that supplemental data for you and giving you an impact report is tremendous. But here is a nuance that not everyone's aware of. So that's what we wanted to count. Here's what we don't want to count. So very interesting fact about ECDS and digital measures versus our traditional measures. For traditional measure reporting, supplemental data, which EHR data is, only helps you with numerators or exclusions. It does not add members to your eligible populations. But for ECDS and digital reporting, if you throw that big data into the HEDIS warehouse and the HEDIS engine runs it, you can add members to eligible populations. So many STAR measures are just about age, gender, enrollment. Supplemental data, big EHR data, is not able to add members there because you know age, gender, enrollment from your administrative data. But if it's a HEDIS measure with a medical marker denominator or eligible population event, such as diabetes, taking a statin, having asthma, so anything medical, if that data is contained in the ECDS EHR feed, you can be adding members into the population. And so that does perturb many plans because those who are 5-star and working towards 5-star are working so diligently year round to know their eligible population and who the gaps in care are. And if they're working them, we get towards the middle or the end of Q4, and now you just got a big data partner giving you a lot of bulk data, an Epic and Athena. If you load it as ECDS, you may be surprised to see 1 or 2% more members. Just added some of your STAR measures with medical marker events for the eligible population. So you don't just want to throw this, you do want to throw the data in to see what's helping in a test run or proactive run, but you need to understand how this can hit your eligible populations. And unfortunately, we're in a very, very, very uncomfortable position for MY 2022. And here's what that is. NCQA requires all certified HEDIS vendors to provide supplemental data impact reports for the traditional HEDIS measures. That's in the certified vendors contracts. They can't not do it. And as we all know, the auditors partner with the plans to make sure you got the credit you wanted, that nothing wonky happened. Well, unfortunately, there is currently no requirement for any certified vendor to give you a report on ECDS measure impact from supplemental data for the numerators, for the exclusions, or even for the eligible population. So NCQA is working to cure this hole, and it's not definite that it'll be MY 2023 or a future year, but right now you're a little blind because although NCQA doesn't require your HEDIS vendor to tell you what EHR data or any other data source that supplemental did to ECDS measure reporting, they are allowed to, but they would have to have that programming in place. And part of the problem is vendors in the past haven't had to tell you, other than numerator and exclusion, what supplemental data did. So many of them are not programmed to say, wow, you just added 0.5% of diabetics to EED, HBD, and BPD. So even if they want to give it to you, if they're not programmed they're moving towards the year they may have trouble. So this is a temporary problem that will go away in the future, but be very aware that big data that you throw into ECDS measures, for measures that have a medical marker event to the eligible population, you could be adding members and not be aware that you were doing that when you loaded the data.
Wow. Okay. That's such good insights and so helpful. So, I mean, and just to kind of recap, we've talked about a lot, but this change coming still 5-ish years down the road, but that doesn't mean um, there isn't a lot of stuff that we shouldn't be doing right now to prepare for that and to be in a better place. We also, because it is 5 years down there, we're not stopping doing necessarily anything we're doing right now, right? But we're evolving into these other areas that you guys have offered such helpful takes on. Yeah, so that's great conversation today. I think we're gonna digest that, let our listeners soak on that, and we may come back. So thanks so much, Catherine. Thanks so much, Brent. I know everyone will appreciate all the insights. So thanks so much for being our guest today. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.